Okay, welcome. I'm happy to see so many people show up for our first webinar of the year, and we are looking forward to telling you about what has been going on here at Energistics and what we're expecting to work on this coming year, and also how to get involved with us going forward. So just a little housekeeping. Everybody is in listen-only mode, and that's to help keep distraction down and make sure that this is a pleasant learning experience for all. As you can see, this is your control panel here, so when the time comes, we will be taking questions, and what we'll be doing is reading off the questions and then answering. Along with me here today is my co-presenter, Jay Hollingsworth, and I'll introduce both of us in a moment. To set the stage, we wanted to just have a couple of poll questions here. Just a couple. The first one is, have you worked with Energistics in the past 5 years? Even though we've got an over 25-year history, a lot changes over the course of time, and in the last 5 years, we've done a lot of work, and we wanted to get an idea of what the makeup of our audience, and if you've been working with us in the past few years. So give people a chance to answer, and then we'll move on to the next poll question. Okay, we're about 50% of the way through. Give you a few more seconds to finish voting. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close now. Almost ready. Okay, so with 79% of the, or 80% of the vote in, good to see that about a little over half are members, and almost half have attended an event. So it looks like we've got some work to do, and I realize now I should have probably had a option for saying have not been involved for the last 5 years. So maybe we'll do that the next time. You can see the results here for yourself. Okay, and the next question is, does your company use Energistics standards? And this is a check all that apply. I do wish that this poll tool allowed me to give you a chance to say, if you answered other, what the other is. So by all means, after the webinar, we'll have a very brief survey that we hope you'll fill out, and maybe you can share a little bit of more details about your answers if applicable to you. Okay. So as we can see, a fair number, almost 2/3 use WIXML, and then varying degrees of use of our other standards. So this will be an interesting we hope to do this again in a year, and it will be interesting to see how those answers may have changed given our focus for this year and what we know many of your companies are focusing on. Okay. And here you can see the results. All righty. So let's move on. Okay, so as I said, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Energistics. I'm responsible for strategic planning and defining operational and adoption goals, as well as delivery, managing execution of deliverables with our staff and members, and engaging with external standards organizations as well. Jay Hollingsworth is my co-presenter. He is our Chief Technology Officer and responsible for the technical adequacy of our standards, including withdrawal, Protocol, and rescue null, as well as the Energistics transfer protocol that you'll hear about. Under Jay's leadership, we've realized a long-standing goal of an integrated family of standards that's based on a common technical architecture. This is something that we've been working on for the last few years, and along with Jay and our members, we're finally realizing that goal. And in addition to providing technical oversight, Jay is our main trainer, and you'll hear a little bit about the training that we're doing, that we've started, and represents Energistics on various technical committees and other associations and standards bodies. So welcome, Jay. So today we're going to tell you a little bit about Energistics. We have a lot of people on the call who have been involved with us and who are members, but as we saw, there are some who are not members and may not be as familiar with us as others. So we'll talk a little bit about who we are and how we work, and then spend some time talking about what has happened in the past year or so with respect to our standards. Spend some time talking about 2017 plans and our main focus area, and then give you some suggestions for getting engaged with us, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for a Q&A. So, who are we? Well, Energistics is a global nonprofit that's a consortium of oil and gas companies, as well as service companies, regulatory agencies, systems integrators, and others. I think the key messages we really want to convey here is that we're member-funded, member-resourced standards development organization. So we have a small staff with quite a large group of volunteers from our member companies and others in the industry. And it's important to note that the standards we steward have been developed by and for the industry. We're not engaged in an academic exercise. We work with you to determine what it is you need to accomplish in your businesses, and then how the standards need to be developed to enable you to realize those goals. So we're focused very much on real-world business challenges. And just to give you kind of a bird's-eye view, this is not a representation of all of our members, but it gives you a good idea of the broad range of membership. And as always, we're looking to grow this because we really believe that with a more diverse member base, we get the best results in the work that we're doing, whether it's around development or adoption. And when we talk about the Energistics family of standards, we're talking about primarily our flagship standards, which are WITSML, PROTOML, and RescueML. And as I mentioned, we now have an Energistics transfer protocol, and all of that is based on our common technical architecture. So we're at the point where, as you implement the next generation of our standards, you can use them interchangeably to address a variety of cross-domain workflows and use cases. And when you think about the fact that you're using data in all aspects of your operation, you want to make sure that data is consistent and that you have the data that you need. And that's what we're focused on here at Energistics. And while our plate is full and we have a lot going on, many of you are involved in other standards organizations that serve the upstream oil and gas industry. And the key message, I guess, that I would like to convey here is that we are members of the Standards Leadership Council, the SLC, as are, I think, all of the organizations that are on this slide, and there may be others that serve upstream oil and gas too. The thing to remember here is that we all cover different aspects of upstream, and one of the reasons that the SLC was created was to help us make sure that we're minimizing overlaps between these organizations, but also that we're identifying gaps and we're looking for opportunities to work together to make sure that the standards we're developing are fit for purpose, they work and play well together, and that when you use more than one of them, you are able to achieve your goal without a lot of integration and interoperability issues. And at the end of the day, the whole reason for using standards in the first place is to realize cost savings and improve productivity. And we don't go into it here. We have another webinar that we've done in the past where we talk about the value of standards. But the fact is that standards underpin every aspect of our lives, and our industry is no different, although standards may be not used as ubiquitously as we would like, and that's something that we're working hard to change with respect to Energistics. So, how do we work? This is just to give you kind of a bird's eye view of how we're structured. The heart of our organization is our special interest groups, and they typically are organized around domain areas. So Woodsmill is drilling, Prodamel is production, and RescueMel is reservoir. We also have other SIGs around regulatory activities and as needed as well. But these are the three flagship standards and the SIGs that support them. Every year we elect an executive team for each of the SIGs, and that team is responsible for the general oversight of the work that SIG is doing. We also have a cross-SIG operations and architecture team, and this team, or these teams, are responsible for overall process oversight and for addressing particularly architectural areas that cross our traditional boundaries, such as our common technical architecture. And the people that staff these teams come from the other SIGs, so they're very well versed in the work that we do, in the technical aspects of our SIGs, they have the overall, the big picture view of things, and can help us make sure that both our processes are working well and that our architecture is sufficient to address all of the needs that you may have. At any time, on any given year, we have 150 to 200 plus volunteers, and we have a small staff of 8 that supports this membership of 100 plus companies and the volunteers that go with them. And I won't read off all the executive team members, but this will give you an idea of the range of companies that support our SIGs from an executive team perspective. And you may notice we have a couple of openings for the Prodamel and RescueMel team. We are always looking to make sure we have a well-rounded leadership team. And hopefully, if there are companies here that are engaged with either of those SIGs and would like to be more involved in the overall leadership, by all means, let me know. And then just to give you an idea of how we work, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we've been around for over 25 years. We've got a well-developed standards development process that's phased with deliverables at each phase and checkpoints and decision gates. Where we haven't focused as much in the past is around this orange arrow, and that's all about adoption. So for the past couple of years, we've been working with our board and with our SIG members and internally with our staff to set the stage to really focus in on adoption, and you'll hear a little bit more about our focal point for 2017 and beyond. But at this stage, we're really looking to put the needed processes and deliverables that support adoption in place. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jay, who's going to give us an update, and that'll include a little bit about each of the standards, as well as what was accomplished in 2016 as well. So welcome, Jay.
Thanks. Sorry. WITSML. So we'll start off, I guess, in order, same order Jana had those on the previous slide. So WITSML is our standard for wellbore data. And obviously an important part of a well or a wellbore is the construction of the well, which is drilling. So the WITSML SIG produces the WITSML standard, but it's really about a lot more than just drilling related data, but it includes that as well. Within WITSML, we move, in general, 3 kinds of well-related information. One kind of information that we move is what are called reference objects. And reference objects are things that don't change while the well is drilling. So that's like the well and the wellbore. Things like if you have a bottom hole assembly, as you're using a bottom hole assembly in the drilling operation, it doesn't really change while you're using it. So so that gets transferred. Anyway, so those are reference things that don't change much. The flip side of those are reports, snapshots in time of things. That's like the daily drilling morning report. WITSML is capable of moving a daily operations report. So the drilling report is really kind of what's been happening down the hole with the drilling operation. The operations report is really more of what's been happening at the drill site itself, what personnel have come and gone, how much inventory of drilling mud do you have, that sort of thing. We also have a fluid analysis report, and anyway, there's several of these reports that are snapshots in time of the state of something. The most widely used parts of it, other than well and wellbore, are the growing objects. So growing objects are things that change as the well drills ahead. So obviously, as you drill forward, you take new directional survey information, you're measuring the rate of penetration of the bit as it goes through the earth, and those kind of things. The mud logger will continue to take samples at the shell shaker and describe the kind of rock that you're drilling through, and will analyze the mud as it returns back from the well to see if there's gas in it, and those kind of things. So the mud logger does their work, and then as you drill ahead, you pause from time to time and measure the angle at which the well is drilling, and so you get a trajectory station. So those kind of growing objects are also moved by WITSML, and those growing objects are where the real-time data comes from. So the real-time object in WITSML 1.4 is the log object. In addition, WITSML also is used not for this transfer of data sort of from the field to the office, but can be used to move well-related data between applications. If you need to move a well header from one application to another, there's kind of no reason to write out an ASCII file that's specific to that kind of that particular transfer. Why not just use an industry standard well header document, which is the WITSML well and wellbore, and move those using some kind of industry standard. So that's a good thing. And the final use case on the slide is actually a use case that shows up in all of the MLs, and that's the realization that companies who are measuring data, whether that's data in real time for WITSML, or real-time data for ProdML, or Earth model data from RescueML, have a requirement to be able to store all of that data someplace. And being able to store it, I don't mean storing it like in a relational database or something where you can analyze it easily. I mean sort of as a snapshot of the way things were at a certain point in time. And right now there's not a good solution for storing the set of all of the real-time data from your drilling operation. But using WITSML XML documents to do that is a really convenient way to archive the history of that drilling operation. So we have quite a few members that are interested in that use case, and some are already developing internal solutions around that, so they have a way to be able to preserve the data for themselves. I guess I would remark that in 2016, we released WITSML 2.0. We've had WITSML 1.4.1 came out 5 years ago, I guess it was, and now in 2016 we've released the new generation of WITSML, which is 2.0, as Jana mentioned. Our second flagship standard is PRODML. PRODML isn't really an acronym for anything. It's just the production set of standards that we have. And you can think of it as moving, as the slide says, transferring data, from the field to someplace, a production surveillance center. What that really means is you want to move production-related information from the field into some place where it can be analyzed and actions taken based on the data. So you could move real-time measurements from a sensor, to an analytics platform. But PRODML is also capable of describing how those production facilities are connected one to another. PRODML is capable not only of describing how the pipes are connected, but you may have some valves closed at a particular time, and so it can also describe the hydraulic network, meaning that part of the network that's open to flow at any particular time. Because in real production operations, you're constantly putting wells on test or shutting wells in to let them rest. So PRODML is capable of carrying both of those kinds of things. PRODML is used also for regulatory and partner reporting. So Norwegian Petroleum Directorate uses PRODML as the reporting mechanism from the operators to the government, and we're working with other governments to try to encourage them to use industry standards for reporting as well. And that same sort of reporting mechanism could be used to report volumes among partners. So if you're an operator and you have non-operated partners that need to know what the well is producing daily or how often you decide to share that information, PRODML supports that. PRODML also has some specialized standards in it for particular kinds of data. So PRODML 1.3 introduced into PRODML distributed temperature, a new generation of distributed temperature sensing, which is a fiber along a wellbore that actually is a continuous thermometer. You can have 10,000 temperature readings along the fiber if you like. And then the new generation of PRODML, which came out last year, PRODML 2.0, introduced distributed acoustic sensing, which you can take that same fiber and turn it into little microphones all up and down the wellbore, looking for holes or turbulence or tampering with the pipeline or whatever you might like to look for using little microphones along the fiber. So we introduced that in PRODML 2.0. So there's quite a lot of specialized information that's covered within the PRODML standard. I guess we'll move on. And then finally, RescueML is the third flagship standard. RescueML solves the sort of eternal problem that there's not a vendor-neutral way of sharing information among the vendor-specific applications. Historically, if you wanted to get a truly integrated solution across the whole application pipeline, as you go from seismic interpretation, through the different kinds of modeling, feeding into reservoir simulation, and then taking the simulation results and turning that back into picking well locations and planning where the wells are going to be, which then, of course, loops back to, the whole little cycle. So there's quite a few vendors involved in those applications, and it would be, the industry has really craved there being a vendor-neutral way to be able to move that information along that circle. So RescueML offers that. Now RescueML 2.0, which was the new generation RescueML, already came out a couple of years ago and is in commercial use. RescueML 2.0.1 came out last year, and then an update to RescueML came out in the same time frame as the other two as ProtoML and WitsML, and that's RescueML version 2.1. This RescueML is also being used in the same archival workflow I was discussing before. If you've used 6 different computer programs to describe your Earth model and then you made a decision to drill, somehow you want to preserve the state of your Earth model at the time you made that decision, then you drill the well and it's a discovery. So now you're going to try to make a decision whether that discovery is commercial and whether you want to drill additional appraisal wells, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to be able to preserve the state of your Earth model at that point, you'd end up saving 6 or 8 vendor-specific file formats in order to preserve that information. But with RescueML, you could save the Earth model out as plain ASCII files and then have a vendor-neutral way to be able to retrieve that, to recover that information again later. So that particular workflow for RescueML is something that a lot of the industry is really interested in, because there's not a good solution for that other than RescueML today. Finally, the last important thing that's been working on, as Janet mentioned, is the Energistics transfer protocol. So formerly, with WitsML and the other real-time protocols, you constantly asked a server if there was any new data. This is called polling. And you just say, do you have any new data? Do you have any new data? And this wasted a lot of bandwidth, which meant that the data transfer itself had a reduced bandwidth. Plus, when you got your data, it could be several minutes old. And the members in the WitsML community initially, and now really all of the SIG communities, wanted a new generation of data movement, and where it would stream as opposed to using polling, and where the data would be as fresh as it possibly could be. So we developed, not we, the Energistics staff, but the SIGs have developed something called the Energistics Transfer Protocol. It's usable by all of the Energistics standards, and it's true real-time streaming. It's based on regular internet technologies, WebSockets in particular, and it reduces by orders of magnitude the latency, and it improves the bandwidth by potentially several orders of magnitude. It can be used for really any kind of data transfer at all, but of course we're applying it to the 3 ML standards that we have. And potentially it could be used for any kind of Internet of Things transfer, but as I said, we're using it for our XML-based standards. Finally, I guess, go ahead, I guess. To remark on the key developments, summarize the key developments in 2016, the 3 releases that came out together in December are based on a common architecture. And now, as of this particular release, you can consider the 3 MLs as one big ML if you like. If you need to move a well and a well bore together with a well test and some information about the characteristics of a reservoir, you can jumble together some objects from WitsML, some objects from ProtoML, and some objects from RescueML. So we're able to describe data transfer workflows. So I guess I was kind of describing there maybe a well testing workflow where I have to have the well, I have to have the well tests, and I want to know something about the KH and skin in the reservoir. So that involves using some stuff from each of the 3 MLs, but it's okay. You can make a transfer now that involves components from each of the MLs without really worrying about those boundaries anymore. The next big thing that is new for 2016 is training. Energistics began introducing training in late 2015, and we really taught quite a few classes in 2016, and we've already been offering classes, teaching classes in 2017. This is a great opportunity to hear from the horse's mouth, if you will, how the standards are supposed to work, how they're being used commercially, and to generate business value by our members. And it's a great opportunity for us to drive adoption and for you guys to learn more about the standards. The last thing that we've really tried to do in 2016 has been to foster an open source community. So previously, when the standards came out, you would get a document of some kind and say, here is the standard. Now, our members are contributing different kinds of source code to enable developers to take up the standards much more quickly and easily. So we have several different distribution methods for this source code and compiled code. We have sample implementations of our servers. We have lots and lots of things, and there's a relatively easy mechanism to get your contributions made available to the community at large. So we want to encourage people to, if you're writing something that you think other people could benefit from, and if it's not somehow proprietary, give it back to the community so that everyone else can share it. Because the value of standards, if one company does a really great job of implementing a standard and no one else does, then there's nobody to listen on the other end of that communication. So really everyone benefits from having high quality implementations of the standards, and so that's what we're trying to accomplish through the different mechanisms we have for distributing code. So on that note, I'll turn it back to Janet.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So a lot of work was done in 2016 and previous years really to get us to this point. So we've thought a lot about what to do in 2017 and moving forward, and we feel, and when I say we, I mean collectively, Energistics and our SIGs, feel that our standards are robust and strong, but standards are only good if they're being used. And so we are now putting a lot of attention on adoption with the goal of broadening use of our standards within our member companies and across the industry. We do imagine that there will still be some development going on this year. Certainly, we've had member donations. For example, Schlumberger and Kappa have donated work they did around pressure transient analysis, and we'd like to add that to the standard this year. Certainly, we would like to expand use of ATP beyond the WITSML use cases, and to that effect, we'll be working with all three of our SIGs to develop implementation specifications for using ETP to address specific kinds of workflows. Typically, we're working in a SIG environment, so drilling, production, reservoir, and earth model related workflows. But we do imagine that those workflows will really cross the domains. And of course, in the course of using the standards, whether it's testing them or implementing them, issues will be found. That's inevitable. And so we'll be working together to address those issues as they're found. And at the end of the day, our vision is that Energistics standards will be ubiquitous in our industry across the entire E&P domain. So, some may argue that WITSML is ubiquitous today, and that very well may be true, although I suspect it's a much older version of WITSML, and there have been so many improvements that we really want to turn attention to leveraging what's been developed in recent years for WITSML, because we think that companies will realize a lot of their business objectives more easily with the newer version. But having said that, what we would like to see is our standards used everywhere. And think of it in terms of when you move from country to country, you can plug in your computer and it will work everywhere, and you don't have to worry about electricity transfers and that sort of thing. It just works. You could apply that to your cell phone, plug and play. There's so many examples of where standards enable us to just live our lives and not even think about the technology behind them. That's where we'd like to be in our industry as well with respect to the data transfer standards. So in thinking about how we want to foster adoption, we've come up with some specific areas, and there's a lot of tactics behind these strategies. But first and foremost, engaging our member companies and by extension the industry at large to understand your business objectives and think through with you how Energistics standards can help achieve them. So we've started an outreach and engagement program with our members But we also anticipate that we'll identify kind of clusters of companies in the industry that we think would benefit from using these standards and have periodic meetings with those companies to really talk through what it is that they're doing and how we think the standards can help, and get them engaged as well. And to go along with that, defining those high-value, domain-specific and cross-domain workflows is key to the strategy, because you know, just apply the 80-20 rule there. There's so many workflows and use cases that you're all dealing with, but many of those are in common, and if we can focus in on those and provide, you know, whether it's implementation guides or best practices or lessons learned as companies are using them, the standards, we want to do that because that will help over time, that will help companies with adoption. Of course, promoting and evangelizing the standards, and to do that, getting out there and speaking to at conferences and at workshops, not just us, but our members as well, is key to our strategy. We also are looking for case studies and success stories. We'll be publishing two shortly. One, they're actually both involving WITSML, one of which talks about ETP and WITSML 141, and that's a success story from Stadol, Baker Hughes, and Kongsberg, so that'll be published shortly. But we'd like to see many more of those stories. So we call on the folks on this call and in our member companies that as you're using the standards, work with us to talk about what you're doing at the appropriate level of detail. Providing tools to aid development and deployment is key. Jay mentioned the fact that we're more and more becoming an open source community, but the fact is that that's not our area of expertise. We're just learning to navigate that open source world. So to the extent we have companies that are working with us who already are fully engaged in the open source arena, we want to learn from them, and hopefully they can help us achieve the appropriate level of open sourceness for us as a standards organization. We've got dev kits that have been developed by member companies and that we are now the custodians of. In some cases, in the case of the standards dev kit that was developed by ExxonMobil and it's now maintained by Energistics. PDS has developed an ETP dev kit as well as an open source server. GeoCirrus worked with us to develop a validator explorer tool for RescueML, and there is some intention that over time that'll be extended to support our other standards as well. And there are other companies who have developed and donated software code, data sets, et cetera, to help enable all of us to use these standards successfully. Education, Jay mentioned the fact that we're doing training more and more. We'll be offering at least 3 public training courses this year. Right now they're all based here in Houston. We may add others if we have sufficient interest and help perhaps hosting. So in April we'll be offering a public RescueML course. It's a 2-day RescueML Fundamentals. And then we'll be offering the WITSML Fundamentals class, also 2 days each, twice this year, once in June and once in December. So those are the 3 public sessions that are planned so far. They will be on our website shortly so that people can register for them and do some planning. And at the end of the day, we want to deliver value to our members and to the industry. And so all of the things I've already talked about certainly will enter into that. But we want to hear from you consistently. So as you're aware of things, contact us. You can contact us personally. You can submit questions and comments via our website. I encourage you to fill out the survey at the end of this webinar. It doesn't just ask, did you like this webinar? It does ask that too, but also asks you what you'd like to see in the future, whether it's webinars or other things. So we're looking to make sure that we're consistently getting feedback from you so that we can deliver value on a daily basis. So we've talked a lot about what we're doing and what we want to bring to the industry and to our members. But as I stated in the beginning, we are our members. There's a few of us, but there's many more of you, and at the end of the day, we're here for you. At the same time, we're only as good as the participation that we get. So we've kind of put together some of the benefits and case for why you should participate here. I certainly won't read them all off to you, but suffice it to say, if we're working together to create the standards and to actually deploy and use them, we have a better quality product, and you have a better experience and are able to achieve your business objectives. What Energistics provides to you is an antitrust environment so that we can come together, work as a group, and not fear running afoul of any country laws around collusion and all of those sorts of things. The other key point that I would emphasize here is that the standards that we are developing are intended to address real-world problems. It's not an academic exercise. None of us are sitting around trying to think of things to do. But to ensure that your business needs are addressed by these standards and also by the tools that are developed to help you deploy them, we need your participation. And I hear a lot of times, especially from oil companies, well, my vendors will take care of that. And there's an element of truth to that. The vendors absolutely need to be involved and take up the standards independent of their customers. But they are always looking through the lens of their own products and services, and that's absolutely acceptable and to be expected. Each company brings a unique voice that speaks to their specific needs, and that's where we encourage participation by everybody to make sure that we're getting all of those perspectives because of higher quality product results. And at the end of the day, we want you to save money, work more efficiently, and achieve your goals. So with that, I would just say, think about what you can do. Join Energistics. Get involved with us to contribute your development and business expertise. Invite us to come and speak with your company, share a success story, attend a class, and advocate others join Energistics. And I'm sure there's other things too, but those seem to me to be some of the key things that you could do to get involved. So with that, we are at the Q&A portion of the webinar, just about on time. And just to remind you, you can submit your questions using the control panel. And also, I wanted to let you know, if you haven't already found it, we do have a handout. It's the slide deck that you've been looking at. It includes some of the notes for what was discussed here and emphasized. So by all means, do go ahead and download that. And you can go ahead and ask your questions. If you're looking for more information from us, by all means, you can email us at info@energistics.org. Feel free to call us. And of course, you can go to our website. And that's one of the things that we'll be doing this year, is taking a hard look at our website and focusing in on how we can make it so it better serves the industry. Things are, focusing on findability and ease of use. So expect some changes in that regard over the course of the year as well. And just as a reminder, we are recording this session, so it will be posted within the next 48 hours, and a note will be sent to you so that you can download it if you would like. So see if we have some questions. Break this out so I can see them better. And I want to thank Alex for sending questions in advance. Very helpful. Okay. Alrighty, so the first question comes from Mohammed Reza Kamyab, and says, no providers implemented the streaming API guidelines for v1.x. Why do we expect v2.x to be any different? I'll let you comment on that, Jay.
Yeah, well, I don't, that must not be referring to WITSML. Because WoodsML real-time data transfer is kind of ubiquitous. So I guess I'm not sure, actually, if any.
So Mohammed, I guess I would say if you have a follow-up comment, feel free to submit that. We'll go on to the next question, which is actually also from Mohammed Reza. WoodsML, what kinds of tools, open source or otherwise, do you frequently get requests for that can help companies besides tools for hobbyists? Are you interested in automatic rig activity detection, etc.?
Well, the tools that the stuff that we most commonly get requests for are actually help to get started developing a WoodsML client or a WoodsML server, and that's the kind of open source information that we've begun to offer on the website. We haven't really had requests from people for open source analytical tools yet, although one would certainly expect that such a thing could happen, especially after data starts streaming via WoodsML 2.0 and ETP. People might want to do automatic rig state detection and that sort of thing, but the community has yet to really start asking for that kind of thing in open source. And of course, open source tools mean that someone's contributing them. So in order for us to offer open source solutions, someone has to develop it in a non-proprietary way and be willing to contribute it. So I would hope that over time people will be producing Spark or R or whatever Hadoop sort of solutions that do analytics which they could contribute to the public domain. And then we'll either point to them or offer them on our site.
As to the question about are we interested in automatic rig activity detection, what I'd say there is that we're interested in what our members are interested in working on, and by extension the industry at large. So if someone comes to us and says, I have, we have a need for a way to support automatic rig activity detection, what we would say to them is, okay, draft up a use case and what it is that you think is needed, and we will socialize that within the member community and really the industry community. And if there's sufficient interest on the parts of a diverse range of companies, and operators, service companies, technology providers, occasionally regulatory agencies may fall into that as well, then there's sufficient resources, then we would initiate a project. So really it comes down to what does the industry need, and is the industry willing to resource the work. So the next question is, what is the relationship, if any, between IHS, a for-profit company, and Energistics? From Martin Story. So IHS has certainly engaged with us in different initiatives over time. They worked with us. We had a project actually with PPDM it was a pilot project around mapping WoodsML to the PPDM data model, and IHS was a member of that group that was interested in that project.
They worked in NAPR also.
Yeah, they worked on the project around extending the production reporting capabilities for partner reporting. They were engaged in that. Just like any other company that works with us on various activities. Historically, there have been other projects that they've worked with us on as well. Beyond that, I can't think of anything, certainly in recent history, where their involvement with us would be any different than any other company that works with us. Next question, also from Martin. Where can we learn more, quote, for dummies, about the possibility to use WoodsML to store acquisition data for long-term recording and exploitation, for example, mudlog data, for which there is currently no other standard, i.e. the use of an existing data in motion standard for data at rest?
Well, that falls into the sort of archival workflow that I was talking about, it's an active point of discussion right now. among quite a few of the members. I actually was teaching a WITSML class, a private WITSML class to a company the last 2 days, and this question specifically about mud logging was a really active question that cropped up during the class, because there isn't a good solution, but you can't take these XML documents and store them in a relational database either. But some of the other styles of NoSQL environments like Spark, Apache Spark, for example, may be reasonable environments to have this data, make this data available that has come in from ETP, so it's available with analytics to be analyzed before it's persisted, and then the persistence ends up being something like Cassandra or some other NoSQL database, because it's time series information, and that doesn't fit the relational model so very well. So there's a lot of discussion about it, but there's no place, there's no archiving real-time data for dummies book yet. But I just would remark that it's a real active point of discussion, and Martin, if you want to come to the technical team meetings and contribute your thoughts about that, that would be great.
Okay. Okay. Are the commercial data exploitation applications software that have an let's see.
Oh, well, the applications that have a WITSML input-output listed somewhere.
Yeah.
So kind of the answer for that is yes and no. If a WITSML server has gone through the certification process, then part of the process of certification is that the name of the company and the product that was certified are listed on Energistics websites. So you can go to the website and find the servers that are certified, but we don't actually have a list of all of the applications that would be capable of moving WITSML data around. We give our standards away for free. You don't have to be a member to download the standard or use the standard. So there are many companies that implement our standards that we're simply not aware of. But having said that, the members do ask from time to time if we couldn't have some kind of a registry. I'm looking at Janet, looking to Janet to comment on this, but it comes up from time to time, and we would have to think of a way to create a registry that somehow doesn't seem like we're favoring one of our members over another, and where we wouldn't have the burden to maintain something if, as the versions of a product changed. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, that's true, and also done in a way that makes it clear that we are providing information, we are not advocating. We don't recommend products or favor products any one over the other. So anything that we do would be done in the most vendor-neutral way possible to ensure that it's fair and everybody has a chance, equal chance and opportunity to provide information about their companies. So we've got quite a few questions and not a lot of time, so I'm going to pick and choose a little bit here. Have some companies mapped Energistics standards to the PPDM data structure format? Well, I mentioned that Energistics and PPDM undertook a joint project to try and do exactly that, and we didn't try to map all of WITSML to PPDM. We actually worked with members, our joint members, to identify representative high-value workflows, and then which of the WITSML data objects satisfied those workflows, and then map those to PPDM's data model. And part of the reason that we did that was, number one, to see if it could be done, and then in a way that was generally useful, and also to identify where the gaps were. And what we found was we had 7 data objects that we were focused on from a WITSML perspective, mapping those into PPDM. And we found that some of the mappings were very straightforward and others involved decisions. And the decisions make sense in the sense when you think about the fact that The data model is implemented in it. Each company implements it to meet their needs and their own ways, and they have their own workflows and their own ways of structuring the data that works with their unique systems and procedures and processes. So we posted the results of that pilot with a clear indicator to anyone who used it that it was a starting point. I'm aware of other companies, commercial vendors, who have tried to do such a mapping that they would make available, more than likely sell it to their customers with varying degrees of success. So, you know, beyond that, that's the most that we've done. Another question, we have PROTOML for DPS and DAS. Do we have a plan to extend PROTOML to cover DPS, distributed pressure sensing, and distributed strain sensing in 2017? Well, same answer, Don, as we gave Martin. If the interests and resources are there, we certainly would entertain extending any of our standards. It really starts with a company, or sometimes it's a small group of companies, who get together and document the use case and what they think needs to be done, so that we can then put it out to the wider community to gauge interest. If the interest is there, the resources are available, then certainly we'll figure out a way to work with you and support any new development. Okay, what else? All right. After the MLs and ETP, what's the next big thing with Energistics? Well, our main, and that's coming from Neil McNaughton. So Neil, we're really focusing hard on adoption. You know, again, if the standards aren't being used, then they're really useless. So with that in mind, we've got a lot of new stuff out there that we want to work with the industry, figure out what they need to help them with deployment, work on testing, work on documentation, education. There's a lot of activity that goes around making sure that they can be developed. Beyond that, I think we are always keeping an eye on trying to keep our thumb on the pulse of technology. That's really Jay's purview, and you know, we expect our members also to be doing the same. So I know in the course of discussions over the last 6 months or so, there's been a fair amount of discussion around the cloud and how the standards can be deployed in a cloud environment. So, you know, I don't know. I know we've got some exploratory things that we've talked about within the SIG to kind of look at that and see what can be done in that regard. Beyond that, what would you say, Jay?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if by that you mean technologically, you know, we've introduced Java Web Token-based security into ETP 1.1 because, you know, security became a serious issue, so we've introduced some security there. Continuing to look at security may be important. We continue to look at whether XML itself is getting long in the tooth, and the current vogue among programmers is to move JSON objects. The joint opinion of Energistics and some of the other Standards Leadership Council members, like the Open Geospatial Consortium, is that JSON isn't yet ready to replace XML and transfer, but it would certainly, you know, make the file somewhat smaller. You know, so we continue to look at that, and so technologically we're continuing to look at things. We'll always think about, you know, new domains, new kinds of you know, white space where there isn't a standard to move some particular kind of information. But right now, nothing has presented itself, you know, that our members would be interested in having us to develop a standard for. But, you know, just like, you know, Don's question, you know, distributed pressure sensing is a kind of a successor really to distributed acoustic sensing, you know, in terms of measuring strain along a fiber. So as those things come up, we'll continue to look at those too.
Okay, and I want to get to at least one of the questions. Alex sent several questions, and I mean, these are all great food for much more extended discussions than we can have here. One of the points he raises is this industry has tremendous fiscal ups and downs, which leave little mental energy to explore new methods of working, let alone new ways of dealing with data. What new factors could smooth out the road ahead and convince decision makers to standardize and modernize their data handling for the sake of ongoing efficiency?
Well, to me, the answer to that is the downturn is when people need standards, right? It's when you have a lot of money and you can pay a service provider to write a bespoke solution that doesn't take advantage of any sharing of any standard data processes, then that's when everybody has a lot of money. So, but during this downturn, I think operators are realizing that other downturns can come, and in fact, oil prices, gas prices may have gone up enough that these marginal U.S. unconventional companies will start producing gas again. It'll drive prices down again. So, you know, we can see this lower longer coming back in spite of OPEC's efforts to stabilize prices. So I think that operators, the companies realize that in a downturn or when you can see an extended period of lower prices, that's when you need standards, because you want to be able to pick and choose among your preferred provider, you know, whether that's a low-cost provider or whether that's a provider of a service or an application that gives you just enough for what you need to be able to do, even if that's not the lowest cost provider. But if every application and every measurement company tries to send you information using their own proprietary format, that will never be the lowest cost or most appropriate solution. So I really feel like the downturn ought to be driving people towards standards today. And you know, the CEO of Statoil said, you know, a year ago that, you know, standards are the next level of innovation. And he was really talking about standard workflow, work processes, and standardized equipment, but the same thing applies to standard data processes and standard data formats.
Okay. And boy, I think we'd all like to talk more about that and several of the other questions that have come up. So we'll do our best to at least put our perspective on these questions, as well as maybe use them as food for thought for future webinars. And on that basis, I would just encourage you to please fill out the survey after this webinar ends, which is right now. Thank you very much for your participation. We really appreciate it, and we'll be doing more of these in the coming year. Have a great day.